Whitney Houston didn't just lose her voice to drugs. She lost herself the day her mother forced her to choose between the woman she loved and the career that would make her famous. A choice made in 1982 when Whitney was 18 years old, and Robyn Crawford was the only person who'd ever made her feel safe after years of childhood trauma. Robyn Crawford met Whitney at a summer camp in 1980 when they were teenagers, and within 2 years they were living together in a romantic relationship that everyone in Whitney's circle knew about but nobody discussed. Until Cissy Houston discovered them together and delivered an ultimatum rooted in religious homophobia: end the relationship or lose everything. Family support, music career, the future Cissy had planned for her daughter. This video reveals how Whitney chose fame over love and spent the next 30 years trying to fill the void that choice created, why she married Bobby Brown partly as proof of heterosexuality to silence rumors that threatened her good girl image, what Robyn Crawford endured watching Whitney destroy herself while staying loyal as her assistant for 18 years, how Whitney almost came out during her 2009 Oprah interview, but pulled back at the last moment because the family code of silence was still stronger than her need for truth, why Cissy Houston barred Robyn from Whitney's funeral in 2012 despite Robyn being the most important person in Whitney's life for 3 decades, and what Robyn finally revealed in her 2019 memoir, A Song for You, that confirmed what everyone suspected: Whitney and Robyn were lovers, and hiding that love contributed directly to Whitney's destruction. Robyn Crawford stood in the back of the church. New Hope Baptist Church, Newark, February 18, 2012. Whitney Houston's funeral. Robyn had not been invited. Whitney's family, led by Cissy Houston, had made clear Robyn was not welcome. Not in the family section, not among the mourners who'd speak, not anywhere visible. After 30 years of loving Whitney, after being her best friend, her protector, her partner, after watching Whitney marry Bobby Brown and destroy herself, after staying loyal when everyone else abandoned her, Robyn stood in the back, uninvited, invisible. Because even in death, Whitney Houston's family was enforcing the same rule that had controlled Whitney's entire life: hide the truth, protect the image. Never acknowledge that Whitney had loved a woman. Robyn watched Cissy speak, watched Bobby Brown create a scene, watched celebrities eulogize Whitney with careful words that avoided certain truths. Nobody mentioned Robyn. Nobody acknowledged what she'd meant to Whitney. Nobody said the truth that everyone in the industry knew, but nobody would speak. 7 years later, in 2019, Robyn would finally break the silence, would publish a memoir, would confirm what Whitney had never been allowed to say. We were in love. We had a romantic relationship. It was real. It was the most significant relationship of her life, and she was forced to hide it. That hiding killed her spirit, and eventually it killed her. But in 2012, standing in the back of that church, watching them bury the woman she'd loved for 3 decades, Robyn said nothing. Because the Houston family's power to enforce silence extended even beyond death. The day after the funeral, gossip sites ran stories: Robyn Crawford not invited to Whitney's funeral, Cissy Houston bars longtime friend from family service. Comment sections exploded. People who'd known the truth for years finally speaking openly. Everyone knew Whitney and Robyn were together. Everyone. The industry, the family. Robyn was the love of Whitney's life, and Cissy made her give it up. Whitney married Bobby to hide who she really was. That's why the marriage was so toxic. She was living a lie. Cissy Houston's homophobia killed her daughter, period. But the mainstream media stayed cautious. Used words like rumored relationship, close friendship, speculation about their bond. Nobody with a name attached would say it definitively. Nobody would confirm. Because even after Whitney's death, even after the funeral, the power of the closet and the Houston family's enforcement of it remained absolute. Summer 1980. Whitney Houston was 16, almost 17, sent to a summer camp in East Orange, New Jersey. She was already performing, already being groomed by her mother Cissy for a music career, already learning to perform perfection. But at camp, she was just a teenager, away from her mother's control, away from the pressure. Robyn Crawford was 19, working as a counselor at the camp. Confident, athletic, comfortable with herself in ways Whitney wasn't. They met on the first day. Whitney noticed Robyn immediately. Something about her, the way she moved, the way she didn't perform, didn't pretend. They became friends quickly, inseparable within days. Talked for hours, discovered they lived near each other, made plans to stay in touch after camp ended. By the end of summer, the connection was undeniable, more than friendship. Whitney had never felt this way before. Robyn felt it too. But she was cautious. Whitney was younger, still figuring things out. Robyn didn't want to push, but Whitney was certain. For the first time in her life, after years of childhood trauma, after the abuse she'd endured, after the pressure from her mother, she felt safe with someone. Robyn was patient, gentle, let Whitney control the pace. Didn't demand anything. And Whitney, who'd been taught her whole life that her boundaries didn't matter, that her authentic self was shameful, that performance was more important than truth, Whitney discovered what it felt like to be loved for who she actually was, not for her voice, not for her potential, not for the image she could maintain, just for herself, her real self, the self she'd been hiding since childhood. 1982. Whitney and Robyn's relationship deepened. They spent every day together. Robyn became Whitney's closest confidant, the person she called first, the person she trusted most. By 1981, they were living together, sharing an apartment, sharing a life, and sharing a bed. The relationship had become romantic, physical, committed. Robyn was Whitney's first real relationship, her first experience of intimacy that wasn't traumatic, her first partner who made her feel safe. Whitney had dated boys in high school, but those relationships were performative, expected. She'd done what was supposed to be done. With Robyn, she didn't have to perform, could just be, could explore who she really was without judgment. The relationship wasn't completely secret. Whitney's friends knew. People around them suspected or knew outright, but Whitney didn't broadcast it. Didn't introduce Robyn as her girlfriend. Used words like best friend in public. Partly because it was the early 1980s. Being openly gay meant risks, discrimination, violence, loss of opportunities, but mostly because Whitney was still figuring out her own identity, still processing her childhood trauma, still learning that she deserved love and safety. Robyn understood, didn't pressure Whitney to come out, didn't demand public acknowledgement. She just loved Whitney, protected her, gave her the space to heal that no one else had ever provided. 1982, Cissy Houston discovered the relationship. The details of how vary in different accounts, but the confrontation was explosive. Cissy walked in on something, or someone told her, or she'd suspected and finally confirmed. However it happened, Cissy's reaction was immediate and brutal. She confronted Whitney, yelled, raged, said things that destroyed her daughter. According to accounts Whitney later shared with friends, Cissy's words were devastating. "You are not gay, you will not be gay. No daughter of mine will disgrace this family like this. This is sin. This is wrong. This ends now." Whitney tried to explain, tried to talk about her feelings, about how Robyn made her feel safe after everything she'd been through. Cissy didn't want to hear it, didn't care about Whitney's trauma, didn't care about her healing. All Cissy cared about was image, reputation, what people would think, what it would mean for Whitney's career. Cissy's homophobia was rooted in her gospel background, her church teachings, her generation's beliefs, but it was also strategic. Cissy had plans for Whitney, a music career, stardom, wealth. And in 1982, being openly gay meant none of that was possible, meant Whitney would be rejected, discriminated against, limited in opportunities. Cissy saw Whitney's relationship with Robyn as an obstacle, something that needed to be eliminated for Whitney's career to succeed. So Cissy delivered an ultimatum: end the romantic relationship with Robyn. Keep her as a friend if necessary, but the romantic aspect ends. Now, or lose everything. Family support, financial help, connections Cissy had in the industry. The music career Cissy had been building for Whitney since childhood. Whitney was 18, still living at home, still financially dependent, still desperate for her mother's approval despite everything. She was faced with an impossible choice: the woman she loved, or the future everyone had planned for her. Whitney chose the career, or more accurately, Whitney didn't know how to choose Robyn, didn't have the tools, the support, the belief in herself necessary to defy Cissy. She'd spent her entire childhood learning to obey, to suppress her authentic self, to prioritize other people's comfort over her own truth. Choosing Robyn would mean defying her mother, risking her career, potentially losing her family, living openly as a gay woman in 1982 when that meant discrimination and danger. Whitney wasn't strong enough. The trauma was too deep, the conditioning too complete. So she ended the romantic relationship, told Robyn they had to be just friends, that she couldn't risk her career, that she was sorry. Robyn was heartbroken, but she understood. She knew Whitney's childhood, knew the pressure she was under, knew Cissy's control. Robyn made a decision: stay in Whitney's life, as her friend, her assistant, her protector, even if she couldn't be her partner, because Robyn loved Whitney, truly loved her, not conditionally, not based on what Whitney could give her. So Robyn stayed, transitioned from girlfriend to best friend, remained Whitney's closest confidant, the person she trusted most. But the romantic relationship ended. The physical intimacy stopped. The future they'd imagined together was gone, and Whitney spent the rest of her life trying to fill the void that choice created. 1983, Clive Davis signed Whitney to Arista Records. Cissy's strategy had worked. Whitney was on her way to stardom. Robyn was still there, officially hired as Whitney's assistant, traveling with her, managing details, always present. Everyone in the industry knew, or suspected, the way Whitney and Robyn looked at each other, the way they were always together, the way Whitney relied on Robyn for everything. But nobody said anything. It was don't ask, don't tell. As long as Whitney maintained the public image, as long as she didn't explicitly come out, everyone pretended not to notice. 1985, Whitney's career exploded. Debut album, multiple hits, Grammy wins, biggest star in music. The success validated Cissy's strategy, proved that sacrificing Whitney's authentic self for commercial success had been the right choice. But the success also trapped Whitney. The bigger the star, the more impossible to come out, the more invested everyone became in maintaining the image. Whitney dated men publicly, was photographed with male celebrities, gave interviews about wanting to find the right man and settle down. All performance, all maintaining the lie. Behind the scenes, Whitney and Robyn's relationship remained intensely close, emotionally intimate even if not physically romantic anymore. But Whitney was living a double life. Public heterosexuality, private truth that couldn't be spoken, and that split between who she was and who she had to pretend to be was destroying her from the inside. 1989, Whitney met Bobby Brown, R&B singer. Bad boy, trouble, everything Cissy and Clive wouldn't want. But Bobby represented something Whitney desperately needed. Escape from the perfect image, permission to be imperfect. Someone who didn't demand constant performance. Bobby also represented something else, proof of heterosexuality, a very public relationship with a very masculine man. The ultimate beard. Whitney and Bobby's relationship intensified quickly. They were using drugs together, partying, being reckless in ways Whitney had never been allowed to be. Robyn watched, worried, saw Bobby's influence, saw Whitney changing, spiraling. But Robyn had no power to stop it. She was the assistant, the friend, not the partner, not the person with the right to intervene. July 18, 1992. Whitney married Bobby Brown. Robyn was there. Watched the woman she loved marry someone else. Smiled for photos, played her role as best friend. But inside, Robyn was devastated. The marriage made the end of their romantic possibility permanent. Official. Years later, in interviews after Whitney's death, people would ask Bobby, "Did you know about Whitney and Robyn?" Bobby's answer, "Everyone knew. I knew. But it didn't matter to me. I loved Whitney. She loved me. What happened before me wasn't my business. But it did matter. Because Whitney never fully belonged to Bobby. Part of her, the most authentic part, remained with Robyn. The woman she'd been forced to give up. The love she'd been forced to hide. And Bobby knew it, which contributed to his jealousy, his control, his need to assert dominance over Whitney, his resentment toward Robyn. The marriage was toxic, partly because it was built on lies. Whitney performing heterosexuality, Bobby performing masculinity, both using drugs to cope with the fundamental dishonesty of their relationship. 1992,000. Robyn remained in Whitney's life as assistant and best friend. She watched Whitney's marriage deteriorate, watched the drug use escalate, watched Whitney's voice suffer, watched the career decline. Robyn tried to help, urged Whitney to leave Bobby, urged her to get clean, offered support, but Whitney was too deep, too damaged, too trapped in the spiral, and Robyn's role was limited. She was the assistant. She didn't have the authority to make Whitney do anything, could only watch, and hurt, and stay loyal. Robyn finally left. After 18 years of watching Whitney destroy herself, after staying loyal through the marriage, through the drugs, through the decline, Robyn couldn't watch anymore, couldn't keep playing the role of assistant when she'd been so much more, couldn't keep suppressing her own pain to support Whitney's lies. Robyn quit, left Whitney's employ, moved on with her life. For the first time since 1980, Whitney and Robyn were separated. Whitney was devastated, begged Robyn to stay, offered more money, more titles, more everything. But Robyn said no. She'd given 20 years. She couldn't give any more. She loved Whitney, would always love Whitney. But loving her wasn't enough anymore. Whitney had to save herself. And she couldn't do that while Robyn was there enabling the lies. 2001, 20's final decade. Without Robyn, Whitney spiraled further. The drug use got worse. The marriage ended in 2007, but the damage was permanent. Whitney attempted comebacks, rehab, therapy, tried to rebuild her career, but she couldn't fully heal. Because the fundamental lie, the suppression of her authentic self, remained unaddressed. Oprah interview. Whitney's chance to tell the truth. Oprah asked directly, "There have been persistent rumors about your relationship with Robyn Crawford. Can you address those?" Whitney's answer: "Robyn is my friend, my best friend, my sister, the one person who's always been there. People want to make it more than it was. People always want to talk. That's just what people do." Oprah pushed gently. "But was it more?" Whitney deflected. "Robyn knows what Robyn means to me. That's all that matters. I'm not going to put a label on it to satisfy other people's curiosity." The closest Whitney ever came to public acknowledgement, but still not the truth. Still the deflection. Still the performance. Because even in 2009, even after decades of suffering, even with nothing left to lose, Whitney couldn't break the code of silence Cissy had enforced in 19. After the interview aired, Robyn called Whitney. "You could have said it. You could have been honest." Whitney: "I know. I'm sorry. I can't. The family, you don't understand." Robyn: "I do understand. I've understood for 30 years. But that understanding hasn't made you happy. It hasn't saved you." Whitney had no response. Because Robyn was right. The silence hadn't protected Whitney, hadn't saved her career, that was already destroyed, hadn't preserved her family's image. They were already disgraced. The silence had only hurt Whitney, had kept her trapped, had prevented her from healing. But still, she couldn't break it. February 11th, 2012. Whitney died. Robyn heard the news like everyone else. On TV, the bathtub, the drugs, the end. She'd known it was coming, had watched Whitney destroy herself for 3 decades. But knowing didn't make it hurt less. Robyn wanted to go to the funeral, to say goodbye, to be there for Whitney one last time. But Cissy made clear, Robyn was not welcome. The family would handle the funeral. Robyn's presence would create questions, speculation, unwanted attention. Even in death, Whitney's truth had to be hidden. Robyn's role had to be minimized. The image had to be protected. So Robyn stood in the back, uninvited, watching them bury the woman she'd loved for 32 years. 7 years after Whitney's death, Robyn Crawford published a memoir, A Song for You, My Life with Whitney Houston. For 30-plus years, Robyn had stayed silent, protected Whitney, maintained the lie that they were just friends. But with Whitney gone, with Cissy's power diminished, Robyn decided the truth mattered more than the image. The memoir confirmed everything. Whitney and I were lovers. We had a romantic, physical relationship. It was real. It was love, the most significant relationship of either of our lives. We ended the romantic aspect in 1982-1983 because of family and career pressure. Because being openly gay wasn't possible then. Because Whitney chose her career. But we remained emotionally intimate for decades. She was the love of my life. I was hers. That never changed, even when everything else did. Hiding that love hurt her, killed her spirit, contributed to the drug use, the bad marriage, the destruction. She spent her life trying to fill the void that suppressing her truth created. The memoir's release was explosive. Finally confirmation, finally the truth spoken by the person who'd lived it. Some people praised Robyn. Thank you for telling her truth. Thank you for honoring what you had together. Others criticized. Why now? Why profit from this after she's dead? Why not speak up when she was alive? Robyn's response: I stayed silent when she was alive because she asked me to. Because protecting her was more important than telling my truth. But now she's gone, and the silence didn't save her. So maybe the truth can help someone else. Cissy Houston never acknowledged the memoir. Never confirmed or denied. Never apologized for forcing Whitney to hide. In 2020, a reporter asked Cissy directly, Robyn Crawford's book says Whitney was gay. Can you respond? Cissy's answer: I don't discuss that book. I don't acknowledge it. Whitney was my daughter. I knew her. That's all I have to say. Even then, years after Whitney's death, Cissy maintained the silence, the denial, the refusal to acknowledge the truth that had destroyed her daughter. Newark, New Jersey, the church where Whitney grew up, still there. Summer camp in East Orange where Whitney met Robyn, the place where Whitney first felt safe. The apartment they shared, 1981, 1982, 2 years of authentic love before the choice. Cissy's ultimatum: choose your career or choose her. Whitney chose wrong. 30 years of hiding, of performing, of suppressing, of trying to fill the void. Bobby Brown marriage. 15 years. Proof of heterosexuality. Destruction of self. Robyn watching. 18 years as assistant. Loving from the sidelines. 2000. Robyn leaves. I can't watch you destroy yourself anymore. 2009. Oprah interview. Whitney's chance to tell truth. She deflects. Still performing. 2012. Whitney dies. Robyn uninvited to funeral. Silenced even in death. 2019, Robyn's memoir. Finally, the truth. We were in love. The silence didn't protect Whitney. It killed her. Hiding who she was killed her spirit first. Then the drugs killed her body. But the real cause was the choice forced on an 18-year-old girl. Love or career, truth or image, authentic self or family approval. Whitney chose what she'd been conditioned to choose, and spent 30 years paying the price. Robyn Crawford is 63 now. Lives quietly. Remembers Whitney. She was the love of my life. I was hers. That truth matters, because maybe if she'd been allowed to live it, maybe she'd still be alive.